A week or two ago, Waldemar Pelser, editor of Rapport, wrote a fascinating piece in which he pointed out that our Stop Zuma campaign of 2009 has been vindicated, despite all of the criticism. If we weren't convinced of the threat posed by Zuma to our constitutional democracy, we wouldn't have acted. What did you see back then that most commentators and most South African voters, quite frankly, didn't?
Well, it was the DA who saw it. I happened to be the leader, and I was very honoured to be in that position. But it was clear to all of us from day one, when Mokotedi Mpshe, who was the acting National Director of Public Prosecutions, withdrew the case, or the cases against Zuma, and there were many, and said it was because of what he'd heard on a taped conversation, which must have been illegally taped, between Leonard McCarthy, the head of the Scorpions at the time, and Bulelani Ngcuka, who was our National Director of Public Prosecutions. He said that what he'd heard in that taped conversation convinced him that there was politics behind the charges against Jacob Zuma, and therefore he decided to withdraw the charges. Now, that seemed absurd to us, because the charges had been backed by a lot of evidence at that stage, encrypted faxes and all sorts of other things. And we said, well, if that tape was so incriminating, let us hear what is on it. And of course, he refused to let us hear what is on it. And we then pursued it through the courts, through 7 court hearings, right to the very top, and then also through having to get a mandamus for various institutions of state to implement the court judgment until at last we got those tapes. And to be sure, when we listened to those tapes, there was nothing at all that could have justified the withdrawal of the charges. And that enabled them to be reinstated. So that is absolutely critical. But I think when one thinks back to that time, in 2009, the Zumaphoria was as big, if not bigger, than the Ramaphoria of 2019. It was an absolute national rejoicing.
So Lenzima Vavi called it the tsunami.
Yeah, the tsunami, exactly. Yeah. And it was exactly how it was seen at the time. There was a national rejoicing. Even establishment commentators like Peter Bruce really welcomed the election of Zuma. And we, in the DA, I think alone, said this is a very dangerous move. He's a corrupt man. He's going to corrupt our institutions. We'd been talking about state capture for about 10 years by then. And we said he will capture all institutions of state to protect himself and his faction, which duly happened. But we alone saw that at that stage. Hence we did all the analysis in the background, but when it landed on a poster, it just said, Stop Zuma. 2 words that captured all of that analysis behind it. And it was incredibly unpopular at the time. Oh, tone deaf, we aren't hearing what the people are saying. We don't know, we're out of touch. We said, this is our prognosis for the future of South Africa under Zuma. Our job as a political party is to spot the trends, to give them voice, and to warn South Africans. That's our job. And we are saying, stop Zuma. And after that, even in our caucus, when I said we've got to pursue Zuma on these charges, there was a huge amount of discomfort at saying, look, we've pushed hard enough. We've alienated enough people in South Africa. And now we're going to come with a court case to get those tapes, to get Zuma charged. It's totally against the public spirit of the time. And my view has always been, and I've repeatedly said it, our job is to get 10 years into the future and look back from that point and say what will have been right in 10 years' time. And it's certainly not what would have been expedient today.
Really interesting thoughts Helen Zille has on Jacob Zuma. Just listen now to what she thinks about Jacob Zuma's impact on democracy in South Africa.
Do you think that if Zuma is brought to justice and if his faction of the ANC is neutralized and the Zuma problem is solved, will it solve the problem that is playing out on our television screens at the moment?
Well, a problem in a country is never really solved because life is just a series of problems that have to be solved. And I suppose the life of nations is also just a series of problems to be solved. And some countries can solve them better than others. And of course, this won't solve the problem because we've learnt from democracies that have reached what they call end of history status. Of course, there's no such thing as the end of history, but points at where people can assume that they live peacefully, comfortably, with reasonable levels of prosperity, without gaping inequality. Those are countries that have achieved a couple of things. The rule of law and constitutionalism is one. The second one is a capable state. Now, however much this internal fighting in the ANC may or may not be resolved, it won't resolve the crisis of the incapable state that we sit here with. A culture of accountability, and we're still a long way from achieving a general culture of accountability in which voters vote corrupt governments out, and also policies, as John was saying, policies that can attract investment, growth, and create jobs. That is what South Africa needs to really get to the heart of the underlying problem. And although if the events happen as you say they will, Jacob Zuma is brought to justice and this uprising is quelled, it will be certainly a big step and an important step in the right direction. All the underlying factors, a capable state, the real entrenchment of a culture of accountability everywhere in our society, and policies that attract investment and grow jobs. Business is not a swear word. We need much more of it in South Africa to create jobs and to enable people to get out of poverty. Those are the things without which a democracy can't succeed.
So the Zuma problem is a manifestation of a much bigger problem. So as important as that battle is to our democracy and to achieving the standard of life that you speak of, it's not the only. It's not the only thing that needs to be done.
It certainly isn't the only, but it's symptomatic of what holds so many African countries back. And the core problem is patronage. Constitutional democracies believe that state institutions are there to serve everybody and to protect everybody's interests against the kind of thing that we're seeing in KwaZulu-Natal at the moment. Jacob Zuma and his faction believe, having been elected, they can control the institutions of state to protect themselves against the people. And this whole notion of using those institutions and their tenders and their contracting systems and supply chain management to look after your friends, your families, your network, your group, is the thing that undermines all of the critical things I've been talking about: the capable state, the rule of law, the culture of accountability, and policies that can grow the economy. That is the root problem of which the Zuma uprising, as we see it, is just a manifestation.
What do you guys think about this? I think it's the beauty of listening to all sides. I think Helen Zille raises some really interesting points about democracy and the culture of accountability, especially as regards what becomes of Jacob Zuma's, trial investigations and all that. You guys would have to really educate us in the comments. But one thing I really think is really interesting is how, history shows a repetition of patterns. And with the reincarnation of the Mkhonto we Sizwe, the reincarnation of the MK party under the leadership of Jacob Zuma, it takes me back to the role in which the MK played during the pre-1994 Rainbow negotiations at the time, and how I think I'm going to also show a video of the ANC conference of 1991, where there were lots of debates on how the MK should function as a wing of the ANC. And now, today, Jacob Zuma seems to be redefining the role of the MK party. And I think his popularity really shocked a whole lot of the political atmosphere in South Africa at the time. I don't know, what do you guys think about why Jacob Zuma became so popular, despite the fact that he had a really interesting period in the presidency, but also this whole court cases that sought to soil his name? But yet, the sort of the what Helen Zille here calls the effervescence of another Zuma euphoria, sort of like almost seem to vindicate the reasonings behind why Jacob Zuma at the time was really subjected to all of that court sentences and all of that. So it's really interesting how his return to the political space seems to be garnering a lot of traction. What does he speak about the populace? What does he speak about the election, the voters in South Africa? What's really going on? What's the prospect of Jacob Zuma, Jacob Zuma's influence in the political space in South Africa? And how is that going to play with the DA, the EFF, and the Patriotic Alliance, and how all of that, even the UIM, all these other parties, what are we supposed to expect? What are we to expect also on the impact of on the impact of Jacob Zuma's court cases to the character of justice and accountability in South Africa? What are the future of these issues? And I think those are the things the DA tries to raise. Those are the issues that Helen Zille here in this video tries to educate us about, because it seems that the DA is more, like she said, more futures oriented, and they try to see ahead and look ahead of what's coming and what's likely to come, and how to really make policies that sort of prevent a sudden shock that is associated to what they see when it eventually comes. And it appears that Jacob Zuma was one of those which probably, according to her, South Africans weren't listening. And now South Africa might have to deal with the return of Jacob Zuma and what prospects that has for the political landscapes in South Africa. So I really would hope that we can engage with this this video, this speech by Helen Zille in the comments. Share your thoughts. What do you guys think about what she just spoken about? What do you guys think about Jacob Zuma? What do you think about Jacob Zuma's influence in the political landscape in South Africa? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please share and like and subscribe, because that's the way you support Kwazemi as a channel, an Afrocentric channel, where we try to understand deeper issues in African history and hopefully develop a collective intelligence on how we wish to build the Africa we want to see as people of Africa. See you in the next one.